Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 133rd Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will engage in an open discussion on the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court. The hearings on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court have been viewed by many as the most contentious in history. It has been speculated by many that each senator on the committee decided how he was going to vote even before the nominee was named. What are we to think of all of this? Today's panel, beginning on my left, is Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council. On her left is Ron Chamberlin. I had the wrong name down here. Ron Chamberlin, co-founder, Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist, and on his left is Tom Finley, co-founder of the Great Lakes Resource Center. This is an open discussion on the Kavanaugh hearings, but more importantly, on the conflict that we have in politics today. So anybody that wants to jump in and...
I thought those hearings were a prime example of the tribalism that's always in the human condition. And you got to use intellect and courage and goodwill to break over that. And that's not very common today in Congress. And it certainly wasn't in the hearings. In all cases. And I try to reserve judgment on that particular thing because no evidence. What could you tell? It was he said, she said. But then I did read an article, and John, you commented on it because I shared it on Facebook. It was an article by a psychologist and pointed out the different kinds of things where these types of aggressive acts, sexual acts happen, and whether or not what the person is likely to remember because of it. And in this case, it said she was likely to have remembered that was him. He found, this psychologist thought it was very, very likely that she was remembering this correctly. In other cases because she knew the person, it was in a context that she knew, it was with other people that she knew, in contrast to some mugger on the street or somebody breaking into the house at night and committing one of these acts on a person, they're likely to remember the fact that the guy had a knife or a gun, not really necessarily what his face looked like. So that it kind of threw it in that. But be that as it may, I think a comment, did they make up their minds ahead of time? Yeah, they did. I'm pretty sure they did. We talk about the president being a problem. We Democrats talk about it anyway. I think the worst problem this country has right now is Mitch McConnell. Personal opinion.
Let me go back to the thing that you opened with. There was also an article written about Dr. Ford co-writing an article where she suggested that under self-hypnosis, it's possible to create memories.
Well, it is possible to create memories. I had one, it's your thing. In junior high school, the class put on a performance of Gilbert and Sullivan's
Excuse me, I'm not
Mikado.
meaning recall memories. I'm talking about...
No. This is an invented memory in my case.
Okay.
And for years, I swore that I was in that production. Well, we had a high school reunion. I think it was our 40th or something like that. And they had a little display, and here's the cast member. I wasn't in that.
I'll be darned.
I remember going to rehearsals and sitting up in the balcony of the junior high school and watching the rehearsals. I knew every song in that piece. For years, I was in that. Yeah. I wasn't. I made that memory up.
Well, it's possible Dr. Ford made up a memory.
It's possible, but because of the psychology's report, it seems it's unlikely.
Yeah, and I think in this case, it's not remembering incorrectly what you did in 7th grade about a play or whatever. We're talking about a traumatic event that occurred with her. And, I know there were complaints that she didn't know the date, and that's very common in those cases. You remember the pertinent details of that traumatic event. The fact that others at this party didn't remember it is not unheard of, simply because nothing happened to them. There was nothing traumatic that would cause them to remember that time and what occurred to her.
Let me ask you this, though. Here you've got two people. One of them you've never heard of at all, and another one has this stellar background. And with an accusation, you decide, well, I'm going to believe her, and not that the person I've never heard of.
Well, my concern is the way that they handled this investigation. As you know, when you look at, I mean, I watched all the hearings. I watched the originals.
I did too.
Before Ford came in. Then I watched the ridiculous setup of each person being allowed 5 minutes to make make their questions, get them across. I watched as the Republicans designated a prosecutor to do the questioning for them, to give them a better appearance that they,
fair.
They're a female prosecutor to ask the questions in 5-minute sound bites, which is a ridiculous way to ask questions. I think probably the thing that concerned me most was Kavanaugh's response when he came out. He was ranting.
Angry?
He was more than angry. I mean,
He was furious.
He was furious, but he was crying. He was complaining. He blamed the Clintons. He blamed George Soros.
He didn't blame the Clintons. He said they were getting back for the Clintons.
Yeah.
It was revenge.
And revenge. And he said revenge is going to be there.
Yeah, he
and
was
this
that
is
way while he was on Ken Starr's staff.
exactly.
Yeah.
But this is a man that is going to be sitting on the Supreme Court who took great care to say that he couldn't answer questions about his positions because he had to enter the Supreme Court unbiased.
Right.
But then in this case, he can sit there and say that revenge will be there. The way that he responded to the questions by the Democrats, I can't even think of her name now. Was it Amy Klobuchar? When he was asked about whether he had blacked out and drinking, and he said, "Well, I don't know. Have you ever done that?" He responded. This is a judge.
I know.
Now there is
He was unhinged by that.
He was unhinged, and as a judge himself, he would never allow someone in his courtroom. Now this was not a court case to handle things
And the whole
that way.
problem
So before all that, you were in favor of him.
No, and I'll tell you why I wasn't. Not until the hearings. One of my big concerns was the fact that this is a man who'd written papers saying that he didn't think the president should be subject to any type of prosecution. And I think that is very dangerous, especially in the times we have. I was also concerned about the fact that there was a great deal of information about him that was not released, a la his time within the Bush case. Do we all go in there with our biases? Yes. Of course, at least he got a hearing.
This place was especially bad because there are at least 5 people on the panel that are running for president. And it was more than your normal grandstanding.
Well, yes. But and then the interesting thing was when it didn't look like the prosecutor was doing enough to damage Ford, then the Republicans had to come out with their fiery speeches. I mean, excuse me, they were posing as well. So, and then, the fact then they would finally agree to have an FBI investigation, but we're going to limit it and you can only talk to this person, and this person, and not really delve into this.
Now, who told them that? The FBI, that they could only talk to those people?
President.
Yeah.
The president did?
Administration, yeah.
I didn't know that was that
Oh, yeah.
established, or is that just speculation?
No, that's well. He said it was the committee that said that, but it was he had told them that this is the only people they're going to talk to. So you're left with that.
Well, if you're looking for a reason to blame the Trump administration for it, there's certainly plenty of things there.
Yeah.
Right. What do you think, Tom?
I just would like to step back just a second and not delve into this and make this statement. This is a classic example of what has happened to our government. We're still not sure whether this was a hearing or an interview. I believe it's supposed to be an interview of fact-finding on content and behavior. That was an example of mob rule. It was not rational thinking any place through that proceeding or process, especially on Kavanaugh's part. If you turned off the sound and looked at behaviors, John, you and I would never have hired that man.
Kavanaugh?
I wondered about that.
We never would have hired him because of the kind of behaviors, the body language that communicated what would happen with this man in whatever executive position we put him.
I wouldn't have hired most of the people on the Judiciary Committee either.
This is where we
Especially
are.
Cory Booker.
This is where we are in terms of, keep going back, the apathy, the lack of understanding of government, the lack of holding accountabilities. This is just a picture that illustrates those very failures that are occurring time and time again when we look at any critical activity going on in Congress or with our president. It is frightening that mob rule is mob behaviors are what we see, and we saw this in this hearing or interview.
When you say mob rule, can you define that a little bit?
Sure, leaderless. Start with that. Not sure of where you're going. Emotion, passion, bias are leading the mob, and it usually results in tragedy.
You know, it's interesting you talk about the behaviors too. I know when Lindsey Graham came out with that very fiery response, I mean, it was suggested that he was auditioning for a job with
Well, he's one of the 5 that's running for president.
yeah, well, or just trying to get it, he wants to take Jeff Sessions' job, possibly after the midterms. I mean, that has been suggested. You know, but you know, you talk about hearings. I remember, you know, watching the Benghazi hearings, and then the hearings over the emails, and I think we saw a foreshadowing of what's coming about now, because those became very uncivil, and you had people posturing for whatever reason,
Absolutely.
either to run for president or to run for a cabinet position, whatever.
Or to get reelected.
Or to get reelected.
Yeah.
So that seems to be the standard now.
Now, the absence of rational thinking and the absence of leadership with these kinds of activities permits an institution like the media to take the leadership in pointing us and directing us.
Yes.
And an example of that is the focus on the bad behavior, that's probably too light a word, of the president completely is taking it away from the behaviors in Congress, or lack of behaviors in Congress, doing their work, their accountabilities. So here we are. If we were behaving rationally as a public, we'd be looking at Congress, who's done nothing. Not just the president, but we are being led, if you will. That's how mobs get created.
I think that Congress is dealing purely from a rational point of view.
Who is?
The United States Congress. And the rationale is, how am I
How
going
could
to...
you say that?
Pardon me?
How could you say that?
I'm going to explain it.
Okay.
No, you mean rational. The rationale.
No, I
Yes.
think what the rational thinking is, their primary motivation is to get reelected. And whenever they think about a possible bill like an immigration bill, they're weighing themselves. It's going to cost me more votes or win me more votes. And when they can't make a decision, they don't vote.
Yeah.
So the rational thing to do is to not vote on a bill.
And you don't want to anger Trump,
and
because then you'll lose your base.
No, rational thinking, I disagree completely with that. I thank you for describing that, but the rational thinking is saying, I've got a job to do and I'm accountable for it and so forth, and I would, and I need to. That's the rational thinking.
What their job is, as they see it, is to get reelected.
Now you see, you put in as they see it, which moved away from rational thinking.
Yeah, agreed.
See?
I've been in arguments with you like this before, and this one has no end to it, so I'm not going to engage it any further.
You know, you mentioned the media, though.
He usually says that when he knows I'm right.
And, you know, sometimes we have a situation now where the media is looked upon as the enemy of the state, that the media is controlling everything, that it is fake news, and that is being perpetrated by our friends on the right. And, you know, this morning, you know, we, of course, just had all the bombings. Well, I shouldn't say bombings, all the delivering of the pipe bombs? Pipe bombs between yesterday and, of course, 2 more that were reported on this morning. And
this is being recorded on October the 25th.
Yes,
Just
okay,
to make
yes,
that
so
clear.
somebody isn't
Okay.
worried when they're watching this. The interesting thing, President Trump has come out with a number of tweets about this, And his comment is, one of the tweets I saw this morning is, he's blaming this on the media. The media has, according to him, had so much fake news attacking him that this is the problem. And that's why we have these pipe bombs.
It's as good an explanation as any, isn't it?
Oh, it's ridiculous. It's someone
Well,
who
most of them
feels
are.
that they need to make everything about
Well,
themselves.
you know,
and make
we
them-
count our president to be the voice of reason. I read just this morning, at the advent of all these pipe bombs, he's at a rally and mentions Clinton, and the crowd chants "lock her up." You know,
Exactly.
that was 2 years.
And they're still
Come
they're
on.
still doing well. And
And
his
they haven't locked
latest,
her up yet. I don't understand that.
well, his latest is that we have the caravan coming up, through. Well, they're in Mexico now. That he's claiming that the Democrats started this by paying these immigrants
George
to
Soros
come.
did. That's why he got the bomb.
Yeah, exactly. And you hear that type of rhetoric, and
I want
What's
You
he
know,
up
it's-
to?
there's big concern.
4 lives per day, something like that. That's right.
oh, well, I heard 14,000. Yeah. Oh, it's more than 4. It's more than 4.
Okay.
So
When we use the word media today, I think I've brought this up before, it's no longer the same definition. The power of the media, in many ways, is the public is the media.
You're
you mean
And
like
we-
Twitter and Facebook
Absolutely.
and all, Instagram and all
you-
those things?
Well, it's been pointed out by many wits that people individually can be quite intelligent and reasonable. People as a whole are completely stupid.
Which is a mob.
That's the mob.
That's the mob. And so if you look at media, it has changed completely. So we're thinking about institutions, the formal ones, the TV stations and so forth. The millions of viewers, listeners to you and I using our computers and phones is it's tremendously powerful.
And the sad part is too, if something goes out on Twitter or someone reads it on the internet, no matter who published it, no matter true or false, people believe it as the gospel
There you go.
if it coincides with their own biases.
You've got it right. We all believe what we want the truth to be.
Exactly.
We just can't help it. I wanted to lean a slightly different direction here. I think I probably gave you some notes regarding this manifesto, progressive manifesto, written by John Halpin and Ray Teixeira some time back. And I capitalized on 4 things they refer to as the pillars of progressiveness. And I read them and I thought that's no different than the pillars of conservatism. And I wanted to find out, since we've got a mixture here, that the number one overriding statement that governs all of progressivism is everyone gets a fair shot, everyone does his or her fair share, and everyone plays by the same rules. Is that what progressivism in 2018 is, do you think? I mean,
I just think-
do we really put an emphasis on things being fair and everyone doing their fair share?
I think that's an impossible goal.
Well, I know.
No, we don't. And I'm equally distressed by the extremists on the left as I am with those on the right.
Right.
And I always like to consider myself as being more of a moderate individual, especially the older I get.
That's true. I think for
Okay,
all of us.
well, let's discuss these 4 pillars. I always thought of progressivism putting a major emphasis on equality, particularly equality of outcomes. This manifesto said, no, it's freedom, which I would say that's a conservative point of view. That the basic value of both conservatism and apparently progressivism is freedom. Do you agree with that?
Stepping back just a minute, John, when you look at the pillars that you listed here, they are the basis of both.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it, but it's an Alice in Wonderland. These will mean whatever I say they mean. That's the definitions. That's the deep, now you get the disagreements, and those are not always rational thoughts, especially when you get left and right. So who can disagree with your analysis here on these are the pillars of both. It's how they get defined.
Well,
when.
I would, if you were to be a progressive, and thinking in terms, to me, one of the greatest progressive keystones in the last ever since from FDR is the war on poverty under Lyndon Johnson, and that when you think about what that did for people and against people, when you look at the pillar of responsibility, responsibility requires that each of us do our part to improve our own lives through hard work, education, and by acting with honesty and integrity. Can you apply that to the war on poverty? I mean, personal responsibility requires that each of us do our part to improve our own lives.
The stinger in that, I think, is that the ability to do that depends on the individual, not on something that's imposed from the outside. Is there a work requirement? Well, that might not be possible for some
Well,
folks.
I think that you would have to assume that we're talking about to improve our own lives through all the hard work that we're capable of.
Just look at the contradiction by using the title War on Poverty.
Yeah, we've made that
War on
decision
poverty
before.
goes completely against what you just said in a rational way. And then your question is, well, how can you answer that question when the title is dictating negatives about how you solve a problem? War on poverty.
You know, I think when you stated that about, you know, you taking charge, I think what the war on poverty was saying, though, is that in order for you to be able to take charge, to work, to take, help yourself, you may need that little boost to begin with, to get in a position.
Well, the little boost became a lifetime habit for millions of people. The dependency that is in a huge part of our population right now is almost intractable. I don't know how when you've got people third and fourth generation that have never had a job or knew anyone who did, you've got a huge problem. I know that the progressives or liberals like to refer to this, well, this is generational poverty and it's not their fault. Well, who the heck's fault is it? If you're ready, if you're capable of going out and taking care of yourself, feeding yourself, why aren't you doing it?
I've met a number of folks in Connecticut, and I'm sure they're everywhere, who had jobs, had good jobs, had a car to get to the job. They didn't have a house. They didn't have a home. They couldn't afford a home on the money they made. They could have used a little more help.
Yes, and the help is there if they would indeed use it.
Yeah.
The training programs that go unused are incredible.
Yeah, well, there are other folks in Danbury in the homeless community who had no desire to be anything else.
Yeah,
there were some of those.
No,
but you have to look at the fact that we are human beings and our psyches are different. And when you write on paper something that ideally should work or should be developed by individuals, when it comes back to that individual, everybody approaches things differently. I'm just going through education classes in school. You would get all of these courses on discipline. If you do this, this is the way the student will respond. If you do this, this is how they will respond. This is the best type of way to get behavior to go down the line. That's great on paper, but it didn't work always in that class of 30 kids sitting in that room to the point where you had to individualize for each individual student.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when we have policies like this, which are general, they don't deal with all those personalities, with all of those individual situations.
Yeah.
And the war analogy here, some general said is all the battle plans you have go away as soon as the war starts. You know?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, there was a celebration. Sergeant Shriver was the head of the War on Poverty, I believe,
Yeah.
and that sometime after, I think it was on the 10th anniversary of the so-called War on Poverty, they had a celebration in Texas that Sergeant Shriver had set up to celebrate the victory over poverty. And what they meant by the victory over poverty was that people did not have a food deficit in this country anymore. Everybody was fed, or at least provided food, or provided with the means to have food, and they were celebrating that victory. What they were not celebrating was self-sufficiency, because that didn't happen. That more or less went away. But moving on, we've got a minute and a half. One more thing. And
John, excuse me. Example on the training is being, and it is all these, the audience, the huge amount of them, have no value in education or training. They dropped out of school or whatever. So why would you put training as a basic element of? So I'll quit on that.
I just wanted to mention the fourth pillar is one that we should really be concentrating on. That it's the cooperation. Rounding out these political values, which are primarily directed at the rights, opportunities, and duties of individuals, is the basic progressive value of cooperation. Cooperation is the foundation of our most important social institutions. Boy, have we blown that one.
What's the definition of cooperation? Or should that be collaboration?
Well, if I had one, I wouldn't tell you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it would be one more of those arguments. That
Well,
went
it
on
might
forever.
be an appropriate title for this forum on terms of the Constitution hints at that by using the word consensus,
Right.
which is only is collaborative behavior. So we could really trail that and look at what's happened with the departure from that.
Well, and look at our Congress now. If you veer from your party's viewpoint and try to go along with the other side,
And that,
right there
that's-
on top of
that
you.
tends to sum everything up, doesn't it?
Yep.
Thank you very much for a good program.